Hey, what's up guys? I'm Hot for TFBTV. I'm out at the range today with two different pistols for you. One is the first generation Walther P99. This is the gun that James Bond carries in about 2.5 Bond films. The other one is the Magnum Research MR9. This is a P99 clone produced jointly by Walther in Germany and Magnum Research in the United States. We're going to shoot both of these, and we're going to talk about why James Bond shouldn't carry a Walther PPK anymore. Stick around. The P99 is a polymer-framed, striker-fired semi-compact pistol, first introduced by Walther in 1997. It's available in 9mm and 40 Smith Wesson. Unfortunately, this is the 9mm version. I wasn't able to track down a 40 cal version for you guys. Sorry about that. If you're a Bond fan, you may remember that James Bond gets his Walther PPK in the first Bond film, Dr. No. Bond continued to carry a Walther PPK all the way up through the Pierce Brosnan era, sometimes a PPK-S, depending on if they were filming somewhere they could not actually get a real PPK. The first Brosnan film, GoldenEye, came out in 1995. He continues to use the PPK through that movie. The next one, Tomorrow Never Dies, came out in 1997. Partway through the film, Bond loses his PPK and is given a Walther P99 as a replacement, which he used for the duration of the Brosnan era.
The new Walther. Ask Q to get me one of these.
It definitely makes sense for Bond to switch to a Walther P99 for a couple of reasons. Number one, the P99 is just a better gun than the PPK. PPK kind of sucks, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. Number two, the P99 is a much more modern pistol. It makes sense for James Bond, a guy who carries a lot of high-tech gadgets, to also have a high-tech pistol. And when those films were coming out, the Walther P99 was one of the most high-tech pistols on the market. Number three is that the Walther P99 just looks better on camera. It's bigger and it has a lot more screen presence. The PPK is so small that it can kind of disappear into the hands of even some smaller actors. Unfortunately, the Daniel Craig films switched back over to the PPK. Not exactly sure why. I assume they're pretty much just trying to mine some hollow nostalgia from the franchise at this point. Anyway, let's take a look at this gun. This is a first-generation Walther P99. There are 3 distinct generations with 2 different trigger configurations. We'll talk about those differences in a little bit. Based on the date code, this one was manufactured in 1998, was imported by Interarms. Since Interarms went out of business in the late 90s, this would have been one of the last pistols they imported. The P99 was a very high-tech pistol in 1997. These had proprietary accessory rails on the first generation. On later generations, this was changed to be a more typical accessory rail system. These have interchangeable back straps of 3 different sizes. The grip is very ergonomic. The gun sits really low in the hand, has a low bore axis. It's very controllable. These guns have a ambidextrous paddle magazine release, similar to HK's, but I think the Walther design is actually a little better. What makes the Walther P99 special is the trigger system. This is actually a double-action, single-action striker-fired trigger with a decocker button on the top of the slide. And there's also an additional feature of this trigger that Walther called the anti-stress mode. So when the striker is cocked in single action, there is a striker cocked indicator protruding from the back of the slide. However, you can see that the trigger is in the fully forward position. This is the anti-stress mode. A slight amount of pressure on the trigger in anti-stress mode will actually sort of pre-cock it and put it into its standard single action position. If the slide cycles, the trigger goes back to anti-stress mode. From here, we have a single action pull, which is fairly light, fairly crisp, although it does have a lot of take up. You can see that the striker indicator has dropped. And we've got our single action striker reset. Very light, very short, tactile, and audible. However, you can also let the trigger out completely into a double action only striker pull. Later versions of the P99 introduced the so-called quick action trigger, which is basically just a Glock-style single-action striker system. If you're looking at old Walther P99s of Gen 2 and Gen 3, the 2 different triggers are differentiated by different model names. So P99AS is the original style, decocker-equipped anti-stress trigger, and QA is the quick-action Glock-style trigger. The Magnum Research MR9 really is functionally identical to the P99. There's only a couple of small differences. So these frames were made by Walther in Germany, specifically for Magnum Research to make these guns, and the uppers were made by Magnum Research in the United States. The grip shape is identical, with interchangeable back straps and a similar lack of texture on this gun. The trigger guard has been squared off. There's no hump in the trigger guard. There's also a full-length 1913 accessory rail on the dust cover. This retains the double-action, single-action anti-stress trigger system. These guns have a stainless steel slide. However, I've actually had this one rust a little bit on me, and it didn't even get wet. So be very, very careful. Make sure you keep it oiled. There is no finish on this slide, and the stainless is not stain-proof. It's just stainless. The magazines for the MR9 are 16-round standard capacity and are marked as Baby Desert Eagle, which is a name that Magnum Research, I think, has used on 2 or 3 different pistols over the years. My P99 came with 2 10-round Mechgar-produced magazines. These probably were the official ban-era magazines since they have Walther-branded P99 base plates on them. It also came with 2 15-round Pro Mags, and I haven't even shot with those. To be honest with you, I'm at the point where I'm not going to waste ammunition testing Pro Mags anymore. The 16-round magazines that came standard with my MR9 fit and function flawlessly in the P99. So these two guns are mechanically and ergonomically pretty much identical. The only real difference that I can feel is that the trigger, the single action trigger anyway, on the MR9 feels just slightly crisper than the trigger on the P99. I don't know how many rounds are through this P99. I bought it used. It doesn't look particularly worn. It looks pretty clean and nice. So this one may not have been shot all that much, but this one I bought brand new and it probably has less than 300 rounds through it and does feel better already than the P99. These both have the same sight design, which means they've got replaceable front blades and replaceable rear sight inserts. The rear sights are also adjustable. The only problem I have with them really is that there's actually quite a lot of air in between the front blade and the rear notch, so I have a hard time holding really tight groups past a certain range with these. Here we have some 5-yard slow-fire groups on the left top and bottom. We have got the Magnum Research MR9 on the right top and bottom. We have got the Walther P99 Gen 1. In the center is Glock 17 with a red dot, just as a control group, with some funky flyers. That's kind of my fault. I think it used to be pretty common for European pistols to come with a proof of accuracy bullseye. Here are the accuracy results at 25 meters. I decided to replicate this test to see if I could shoot the pistol as accurately as it was shot by a Walther employee 20 years ago. So here are my results. I don't know what a meter is, so I just shot this at 27.5 yards instead. I used 124 grain Czech ammunition because it should be pretty close to the NATO spec 124 grain stuff that I suspect they were shooting at Walther. As you can see, I did not do as well as the Walther employee who accuracy tested this gun in 1997. All right, let's take these pistols to the log. Hang on a second. This doesn't look quite right to me. I see what's going on here. So the uppers on these pistols are so similar that they do, in fact, completely interchange. See if I can make sure I get them on the right pistol this time. On the inside, you've got the very odd-looking double-action, single-action striker system. It's odd-looking, at least if you're used to Glocks. It's got a very beefy single recoil spring and standard barrel geometry. I know this is a bad idea with the ammunition shortage, but you don't get a lot of chances to do this stuff, so you just kind of got to go for it. I wish I could say that ever got old, but it really doesn't. The P99 really is a gorgeous gun, and I think they do shoot very well. Although, in my opinion, the trigger is more of a curiosity than a feature at this point. If you want to buy one, I would recommend the first gen. They're not particularly practical because of that proprietary accessory rail, but they are the best looking, they are the most historical, they are definitely the most desirable. Some of them were also offered with an OD green frame. If you can find a 9mm version with the green frame, that is a particularly desirable configuration. I would definitely recommend getting one of those. And everything about the P99 pretty much applies to the MR9 since it's mechanically identical. It's only really going to have appeal to the hardcore collectors. No one's ever going to get quite as excited about an MR9 as they are about a first-generation P99. As far as a range toy goes, the Walther P99, Magnum Research MR9, or Smith Wesson SW99 are all fantastic guns that you would have a great time shooting. That's our show, guys. Thanks for watching. TFBTV is supported by our sponsors, Ventura Munitions and Top Gun Supply. We really appreciate their support, so go ahead and check them out. We are also supported directly by viewers like you via Subscribestar and Patreon. You can find links to both of those in the video description. You can also find a link to our Discord server, where you can talk about guns like these, or you can talk about anime, which is generally the more popular option. Have a good one. See you next time.